We are getting into survival mode in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. For two teams, it's already too late. For those on the brink, time to dig in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Theory of Hockey Show. I am your host, Nick Zararis. On today's show, we are going to bounce around the stories that are developing throughout the Stanley Cup Playoffs. We will start out our shows visiting with the two teams already eliminated, the Ottawa Senators and LA Kings. We'll bounce to the Dallas-Minnesota series. We'll hit on Tampa Bay, Montreal. We'll check in on the Oilers, who are down 3-1, and then we will do the top 5 power rankings of teams that should win the Stanley Cup. So, getting the ball rolling on this opening segment and talking about the Ottawa Senators. Whenever a team I think is going to win a series, I really like to dive into the weeds. I really like to try and understand where in my evaluation, what I was thinking didn't ultimately work out. So anytime, especially a series like this, where Carolina has been like a metronome, they have been a very consistent team in the early rounds of the playoffs where they have managed to beat lower quality competition pretty consistently for much of the Brind'Amour era. One of the consistencies of these Carolina Hurricanes teams, even though they might not necessarily have the most high end of star power, they have pretty good players and guys like Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis, who are amongst the best players in the world. Seth Jarvis got into Team Canada at the Olympics as an injury replacement. And Sebastian Aho, of course, was the number one center for Team Finland without Sasha Barkov playing because of his injury. But they're not of the caliber of the teams that beat them, like the Bruins, like the Panthers, like the Rangers, where the way the Hurricanes have typically beat up on teams in the earlier rounds is through their depth. A lot of teams have enough top 6 talent that if you make the playoffs, those lines are going to be able to give you something. But where Carolina has often found success against teams like, say, the Devils and the Islanders in recent history has been the third and fourth line. The Hurricanes, although they are not abound with incredible talent, they are a greater than the sum of its parts type team. And they have done an interesting job of trying to fine-tune some of their internal perceived weaknesses. I think Carolina has done an interesting job in that regard, going after guys like Nick Ehlers and K'Andre Miller, who might not necessarily fit with what we identify as Brind'Amour Carolina Hurricanes hockey. But those two guys were not integral, but key components to why Carolina was able to pull away. So number one, my biggest worry for this series for Ottawa, because I did pick Ottawa to win the series in 7 games, my biggest concern was Linus Ullmark. I wanted to know, could Ullmark play at a fringe Vezina goalie level? And goals saved above expected. He had over 10 goals saved above expected in 4 games. Linus Ullmark did his job in this series. Whenever you get a goalie who has that threshold where we know on the high end range of outcomes, he can be a genuine star, that opens up your eyes and says, okay, what else does Ottawa need to go right for them? Well, down the stretch in the regular season, Ottawa was a really good possession team, and that was dealing with key injuries, with Jake Sanderson missing a good majority of the stretch run, with Thomas Chabot missing 2 or 3 weeks, with Artem Zub missing multiple weeks of the final month and a half of the regular season. Ottawa was not flukily riding hot goaltending. They weren't getting by on a shooting bender. They were playing elite possession hockey. They were winning on the forecheck. They were grinding teams into a pulp. And I thought the head-to-head matchup against another team that likes to dump and chase, that likes to grind it out, and likes to forecheck aggressively, I thought Ottawa would have an edge because of their defense, because of Jake Sanderson, because of Thomas Chabot. I thought having those caliber of guys on the back end would be a bit of a forecheck breaker, if you will. And then you go and look what happened. Ottawa could not score. In 4 games, in 4 games, Ottawa got 3 goals at even strength across 4 games, 3 even strength goals, 2 from Drake Batherson, 1 from Dylan Cousins. They went 1 for 21 on the power play in this series. The Senators could not score enough to be competitive. And while some of these games ended in blowouts, there were also quite a few games that were very close where we're dealing with 1-goal swings. And anytime you're sitting here sifting through the debris, it sounds a lot like sour grapes to say, well, if this goes differently or if that goes differently. And does Ottawa have a modest gripe on that first scoring chance, that goal that gets called back in game one, that could have been a goal, but ultimately is determined to have not been upon review. Yeah, you can be a little agitated about that, and we'll talk about this more when we get to Edmonton. Anytime you leave the game in the hands of the officials, you are leaving it out of your control. You are leaving outcomes to chance. And anytime you are not in control of your destiny, you don't get to complain about things being unfair. It's just the way it is in sports, where we come down to subjective decisions from guys who are trying their best to keep up with a hyper fast and challenging sport to officiate. So on that regard, number 3, Brady Tkachuk, 0 points in this series. Look, I will eventually do at some point during the summer a real deep dive on Brady Tkachuk because I think he's an interesting player. He's never been over a point per game on an 82 game pace. He's never really had a transformational superstar playoff series or moment where he's put his team on his back. I think he's a really good player. 65, 70 points, high-end power play one guy, can really control the net front. I think all of the traits there are really compelling. We have to account for the fact he's a little bit slow. You did see that in his usage in the Olympics, where he didn't get out there in any of the overtime periods at the games Team USA went to overtime. When you don't have the foot speed, trying to withstand the forecheck of a team like Carolina, that's a real challenge. When you have to work extra hard as a guy who's a little bit slower, and you have to rely on positioning and anticipation, if the other team is consistently faster than you and beats you to your spot, and look, under the hood, Tkachuk's numbers weren't atrocious, but the line for a team like Ottawa to have pulled off this upset, they were going to need their stars like Brady Tkachuk, like Tim Stützle. They were going to need those guys to thrive in their minutes. And that way, the Oilers' lack of depth in relation to Carolina wouldn't have been as glaring of a problem. But with Dylan Cousin and Riley Gregg, who's going to get suspended for probably at least a game to start next year, 36% of the expected goal share, 50% of the high danger chances. Tkachuk on his own, 45% scoring chances, 45% shots on goal, 47% expected goals, 48% high danger chances. He's around the net front, great, but they're losing those minutes. And against a team like Carolina that is going to control play, you need your goalie to be lights out. And this has been Carolina's Achilles heel in the past. When Carolina's played the team with the superstar goalie, whether it's Shesterkin, Bobrovsky, Jeremy Swayman, previously going even further back, Tuukka Rask, when they have played the goalie who's good enough to withstand volume, that's where Carolina's run into problems when it comes to scoring. But in this series, for as great as Ullmark was, and make no mistake about it, Linus Ullmark was great. Ottawa's having their breakup day today on Monday. Their availability, the quotes have been trickling out. Ullmark said something along the lines of, the playoffs were the first time I had fun this year. Ullmark had a really difficult year. Personal issues, off the ice stuff, that was really bugging him. And down the stretch, he had told them he didn't feel up to play in a game, that he wasn't mentally where he needed to be if he wanted to be effective, which I have no problem with. Ultimately, we as sports people need to understand that mental health is equally as important as your physical health and well-being. If you don't feel like you can compete at the highest level, that's no different from having a broken arm. Sure, there are going to be people who have the individual perseverance and discipline that they can try and tough out when they don't feel their head is right. But I would rather my player come and tell me he doesn't feel like he can play than sending him out there and being disappointed with the result because he was trying to troop through. Ullmark was not the problem for Ottawa in this series. You have Jake Sanderson get concussed midway through the series. You had Thomas Chabot say he's still probably about 3 weeks away from his broken arm healing, and that's after playing in the playoffs, that his arm is littered with plates and screws holding it together so he could get into the lineup. And when your two best defensemen are not at 100%, or in the case of Sanderson, miss games, you're going to have a really steep uphill battle. Ottawa's path to winning in this series was going to be playing Carolina's game against itself, was quick strike transition, getting pucks in deep, forcing the Carolina defenders into individual decisions. And On paper, Carolina's defense is a little questionable. Yes, Slavin is still probably the best defensive defenseman in the world. Andre Miller has fit in really nicely there. He did an amicable job filling in for Slavin as the team's first defenseman this year while Slavin was out with injuries leading up to about the Olympic break. Sean Walker is a decent 3-4 tweener. But Carolina's defense, it's not abound with individual talent. You know, Shabbat and Jake Sanderson, for my money, are more physically talented than anybody on the Carolina defense. Maybe Miller, but Miller is still more of an idea than a proven entity. I've always liked K'Andre Miller's game. I think a lot of his limitations have always come down to his positioning and his positional awareness. So in a system like Carolina's, where his responsibilities are very rigid and structured, it's easier to keep him on track and get the desired results than maybe what we had seen from him in New York, where his lack of physical checking became an issue, especially in transition, where he would reach a lot, he would get caught bending over, and that would ultimately lead to dangerous scoring chances against. Or because there was a bit more leniency in structure in New York, him and Jacob Trouba, one of the most common defensive pairs over those two's 4-year combination of being on the Rangers at the same time, they would constantly get crossed up. And you would expect a defensive pair with 5,000 plus even strength minutes over a 4.5-year, 5-year period would figure out what the other guy is supposed to be doing at a certain point. And yes, they had different coaches, they had different assistant coaches, and the change in systems, especially for Miller, who was in the developmental stages of his career, first, second, third, fourth year. Even now, it sounds crazy to say about Miller, who's midway through an interesting NHL career at this point at 26, 27 years old. He's still kind of figuring out what he can do with his traits. And I think Miller has really high-end potential there. You look at what Carolina was able to get out of the Taylor Hall, Logan Stankoven line at even strength in this series. That line dominated. And yes, while Logan Stankoven is a significantly lower ceiling player than Mikko Rantanen, who the Hurricanes got in return for Rantanen, Stankoven has fit there very nicely. And the combination of him, Taylor Hall, and what they got out of Jackson Blake's the guy we identified here on Theory of Hockey as being one of the Carolina X factors, and Carolina's depth was great in this series. Now, we'll see how much Carolina can ride this we're going to pummel you into a pulp on the forecheck type of game. But I was very impressed with Carolina. Frederik Andersen did his job. The Hurricanes played really smothering hockey. He didn't have to do a lot, but on the occasion, Frederik Andersen did have to make a save or two. He did well enough. And when you're a goalie like that, where not only are you more of an environment goalie, and look, the vast majority of goalies in our league are environmental goalies. There are maybe 5 to 10 guys in the whole sport who are good enough that what happens in front of them, they can overcome that if it's adverse. You think about historically what you've seen from guys like Shesterkin, Sorokin, Andrei Vasilevsky, what Bobrovsky used to be able to do, what somebody like a UC Saros or a Pekka Rinne. If you're going back last decade, you think about Carey Price, Henrik Lundqvist, Roberto Luongo. In today's game, we're talking maybe 5 guys who fit that threshold of being good enough that they can steal games in spite of having really challenging circumstances in front of them. But nice series win for Carolina. For Ottawa, from this point on, you have questions. I like a lot of the pieces Ottawa has. In spite of my grand opinion that Brady Tkachuk's not a superstar, he's just a star, he's still a good hockey player. You have Tim Stützle, who is very early on in his development cycle. I think Jake Sanderson has top 10-ish defenseman in the world potential. You think about where they're at with guys like Cousins and Batherson. The Senators have a majority of this young core locked up under contract for at least another 2 or 3 years. We will see what the money ultimately looks like on a Jordan Spence extension. He's a restricted free agent this summer. And we will see if Claude Giroux decides to return for another year. Giroux is an unrestricted free agent this summer. Giroux had said if he decides to come back, he would like to stay. If he comes back to play, he would like to stay in Ottawa. It's where he's from. It's where he's had a pretty nice final act for his career as the older guy on a young team trying to get to that next level. For Ottawa to get to that next level, they need more offense. It's really that simple. I think on paper, when their defense is healthy, it's a really solid group. When you have a guy like Sanderson to buoy your top pair, Shabbat on your second pair, and then you have Zub and you have Spence, that's a really strong foundation for a good defensive core. And then it becomes a matter of how can we facilitate more offense? Where do we go to get that another 20 goal scorer? Is it in free agency? Is it a trade? Do we try and swing another Alex DeBrincat type trade where we're going to sell our first round pick close to top of market price to go out and get somebody who can age along with our core? If I'm Ottawa, as much as that Brady Tkachuk conversation is out there, make no mistake, it is out there. Whether or not it's founded is a different conversation about Tkachuk's desires to play in the U.S., to play with his brother on the Panthers. I don't know how much of that I want to believe at this point. He's the captain of that team. It's the only organization he's played with. Now, if you told me straight up, yeah, he told the Senators he wants to go to one of 6 teams, these are the 6 teams, okay, I believe you. But until I see Brady Tkachuk get traded, I am going to lean on the side that Ottawa should probably try and hold on to him and find the next piece to supplement him. Teams do not get better by trading away stars. It is very difficult to win the superstar trade. Colorado managed to do it last year in trading Mikko Rantanen because they got Marty Necas and they got a little more cap flexibility and they were able to add to their depth. Nelson, Kadri. I really like the way Colorado was able to salvage value from Rantanen, even though there's probably a world where they're equally as good right now with Mikko Rantanen in the fold, even if they maybe would have had to pay him a little bit more than they wanted to. All of that said, I think Ottawa, a really solid regular season you can feel proud of if you're a Senators fan. That team was in really rough straits with 4 or 5 weeks to go. They got white hot. All the stuff Olmark went through, the injuries they faced, and they still managed to qualify for the postseason. You don't really believe in moral victories in sports once you get past a certain age, but the Senators, for what they had, the tools at their disposal, they couldn't do a lot. And it's one thing to complain about officiating, but they were outgunned. They didn't have the juice to make this a competitive series. My evaluation of what Ottawa's capacity in this series was massively wrong. Ottawa didn't lead at any point in this series, and I had them winning in 7 games. Now, transitioning to the Kings Colorado Avalanche series, the other one that ended in a sweep, the final game for Anze Kopitar, which we'll talk about in a minute, but much the same story. In today's NHL, it is a real challenge to win on defense and goaltending. The threshold for talent in the league has never been higher. The average NHL player skates better and shoots better than at any point in history. Even defensemen, even fourth liners look so much better than the guys who were filling out third and fourth lines 10 years ago. I think about some of the Ranger teams I watched in the early 2010s with guys like Darryl Powell and Jeff Halpern and Aaron Asham. I think about guys who didn't look like full-time NHLers, who could not score, who went 40 or 50 games at a time without putting a puck in the net. And there are guys now who don't score, but they look the part of an NHLer. And you think about the Kings, who came into this series last team in, second wild card, had a chance to get to as high as the 3rd seed in the Pacific Division if they had won on the last night of the regular season and the Ducks had lost. But they lose, the Ducks win. The Kings have the most daunting of challenges. The Avalanche, who had effectively been locked into a playoff spot since American Thanksgiving, you have to go in as a defense and goaltending team against the highest scoring team in the league. That is a recipe for disaster, because to the Kings' credit, they play really good defense in this series. Much like I would say the Kings have played really good defense against the Oilers the last 4 years in the first round. You can be a really good defensive and a really good goaltending team, but if you cannot score consistently, you are not going to win in the playoffs. In the regular season, if you're the Kings, you can get by limping these games to overtime, winning in the shootout, winning in overtime, or just racking up your loser points. If you play good defense and you get to beat up on the soft parts of your schedule and you smother the bad teams, that's enough to get you in the door of the postseason. But for this specific version of the Kings, it always felt a little more tenuous. You had the looming Kopitar last dance part of this. You have the fact that Kevin Fiala got injured during the Olympics and you were missing your second or third best forward on the team, depending on how you feel about some of the other supporting cast members. But the Kings just didn't have it. 2 even strength goals in 4 games. Joel Edmondson and Trevor Moore being your goal scorers. Come on. You can't win a playoff series scoring 2 goals at even strength. You couldn't win a game if you only scored 2 goals at even strength. The power play, which had been really good in the regular season once Panarin got there, didn't give them a whole lot either. 3 for 16 on the power play, 19%, a little bit below league average. And then the real pain in the butt here, if you're the Kings, you went out and you paid for Panarin. You did that on the assumption that Fiala would be on the team post-Olympics, but Fiala got hurt at the Olympics, couldn't come back. Broken hip, serious injury, not something that there was even a possibility Fiala could return from. But you had Panarin, Kopitar, and Adrian Kempe going 100%, 100 miles an hour down the stretch. Dominant line at even strength, 67% of the goal share at even strength, post-trade deadline for those 3. One-line team. You have Quentin Byfield, who I still think has another level to get to, but I say that about a lot of young guys. I'm always going to err on the side of possibility because those guys are tantalizing. Byfield is one of the few guys on that team that skates at a really high level. Him, Fiala, Kempe, all really shifty players in transition, dangerous players where if they can get the puck with space, they can create a lot. But you look at this Kings team, and they just didn't have it. And very, very different from Ottawa. Ottawa, I feel like if they play this series again and they're a little healthier, I think there's a world where they can get this to 6 games. I think they can score a few goals. They get a couple bounces. For the Kings, who were so predicated on defense and goaltending in the regular season, to end up in a series where their defense was pretty good against Colorado, knowing their offense wasn't going to be able to help them. And that's really what's daunting about this if you're the Kings. If you were going into this series and you were trying to go through all of the plausible scenarios in your head as to how the Kings could get this to a 6th or 7th game, I had picked the Avalanche in 5. I thought the Kings would be able to steal 1 on home ice with defense, goaltending, a little bit of smoke and mirrors, a little bit of magic. But the Avalanche are really this good. Now that they can run McKinnon, Brock Nelson, and Kadri down the middle when they need to separate those 3, that's really good center depth. I can make an argument that might be the best center depth of any team in the entire NHL right now in these playoffs, and it's part of why Colorado was able to score at such a high clip. And the last thing as far as like stats go and just a mindset about this series, if you were trying to find that path to a elongated series for the Kings, you were always going to need either a Panarin 5-point game, a Kopitar 5-point game, or you were going to need something out of your goalie room. And look, anytime we're going to the drawing board and debating who our starter is, look, they went with Anton Forsberg in the playoffs. He started all 4 games. Forsberg had decent numbers. A .909 save percentage against the number 1 scoring team in the NHL. That's nothing to sneeze at. And look, I've always been a little bullish on Darcy Kemper. Kemper has always been a little bit better than he probably does, probably better than he gets credit for. You look at his playoff numbers, you look at his regular season numbers, he's been a top 9, 8 goalie in the world for a lot of the last 5 years. He won a cup in Colorado, got picked for the Canadian Olympic team, even though he didn't get into a game. I really wanted to see the Kings find a way to get one magical game, to get one win for Kopitar, because a guy like that, and that's where I want to pivot to talking about, that is an organizational cornerstone, where even if you get another star player, you're going to spend the rest of your life thinking about, he's not Kopitar. And that's a rough place to be. You know, as a Ranger fan, I deal with it with the old heads. Yeah, he's good, but he's not Messier. He's not Brian Leetch. I get Ranger fans who tell me Mike Richter is better than Henrik Lundqvist. And obviously Henrik Lundqvist is a better player. But when you have those lifelong players where there are people who have spent their entire life as Kings fans who have only known a team with Anze Kopitar. Kopitar has been one of the best players in the NHL for 20 years. You know, he's never going to get the Sidney Crosby flowers, the Patrice Bergeron flowers, because hockey is a regional sport. Hockey is a Canadian-centric sport. By being on the West Coast, by not being American or Canadian, Kopitar was never going to be able to get into the conversations with Bergeron, with Jonathan Toews. And look, Mid 2010s, those were arguably the three best two-way centers in the world: Bergeron, Toews, and Kopitar. I think there were points where Bergeron was the best of the three. I would say later on, late 2010s versus early 2010s, Toews in the midst of that Blackhawks run was probably the best for a 2 or 3 year window. And there were points in there where Kopitar was the best player. I can make a very strong argument on this show that Anze Kopitar was the best forward on 2 Stanley Cup winning teams. That's a really high bar. There are not a lot of guys in the league who can say they were the best forward on a 2-time Cup winning team. And the thing that becomes part of this conversation, we'll talk about it more with the Oilers, you spend a lot of time living up to expectations. When you have somebody as good as Kopitar, and look, you can lump Drew Doughty in here. I think Doughty at this point is a really unique player in the sense that his mind is probably more valuable than what he can actually do on the ice. He's still a decent defensive defenseman, but his puck moving instincts are nearly what they were 5-10 years ago, where he was at one point a Norris caliber defender. And now he's largely gotten by on reputation. He wasn't bad at the Olympics for Canada, but he didn't have the speed you really needed or the puck skills to make a major impact in a game like the gold medal game the US and Canada played. For me, I think the thing I find the most interesting about Kopitar and this entire Kings franchise post that second cup win in 2014 against the Rangers, they never had a second apex. You think about all of these teams that go on those types of runs where did it take the Penguins a while to get back around to being a playoff team after they won the 2 cups? Yeah. They go a while. They don't win a playoff series. The Penguins have not won a playoff series since they got out of the first round and then lost to the Capitals on the way to the Capitals winning the Stanley Cup. The Penguins have not come back around. The Bruins team that went to 2 finals in 4 years, that won the Cup in 2011, they got back to the final in 2019. They went to quite a few conference finals as well. The second version, where the team is built around Bergeron and Pasta and McAvoy and an aging Marchand and an aging Chara. You know, that Bruins team was able to have a second life. You think about some of the teams where the Leafs, for example, they had one continuous window. We'll see if the Leafs with Matthews, Nylander, and Tavares can put it back together for a second life. We'll see. The Panthers, pre and post Huberdeau, is an example of one core versus another. The Lightning, pre JT Miller trade to Vancouver versus after, where 2 or 3 life cycles go through a team to get where you want to get to. And the Kings were never able to really put it all together around Kopitar, Doughty, and Jonathan Quick for a while. You think about the Kings who went into that playoff series in 2018 against the Vegas Golden Knights, were expected to beat the Golden Knights and lost. All of these losses to the Oilers in the first round over the years, where the Kings have built a really high floor regular season team through defense, through goaltending. It's not sexy, but it's effective. It wins you games. It gets you into the postseason. The challenge for the Kings has been trying to get the supporting cast right for those guys. And they've taken swings. They went out and they paid Adrian Kempe what they have. They traded a first-round pick that became Brock Faber for Kevin Fiala. They traded for Artemi Panarin at the deadline. Now, some of the other moves, you think about Brian Dumoulin, you think about Cody Ceci, those aren't exactly what I would classify as good swings, but they have tried. They've made some bad choices in there as well. They've given up on guys maybe a little bit earlier than you would want to. You haven't had that augmenting second wave. They traded away Jordan Spence to the Senators, who would have been really helpful in this series against the Avalanche, who are so fast and so skilled. They didn't really get Quentin Byfield to break through the way maybe he'd hoped he would, similar to the conversation we have a lot of the time about an Alexis Lafreniere, where a lot of guys in that 2 or 3 year window around COVID had their developments altered, stunted, whatever word you want to use, and never really lived up to their pre-draft potential. I still think Byfield is a talented player who could eventually become a 60, 70 point guy with some upside, but he's never going to be Kopitar. And moving on from these franchise legends is a real challenge. It's good they still have Doughty there. They have enough guys that team isn't going to be lifeless next year, assuming Fiala is able to come back from his Olympic injury and be his pre-injury self. But that's a team that's going to go through a transition now, where they're going to have to start moving away from the legacy of that Dean Lombardi and Daryl Sutter team that won those cups 11 years ago. I mean, the Kings have not won a playoff series since they won the Stanley Cup in 2014. And we're talking 12 years later, and they've made the playoffs a bunch in that period of time. And they have taken aggressive swings to try and win playoff series. They have fired coaches. They have fired GMs, and maybe clinging on to that past a little bit too long box them in to some degree. But at the same time, Kopitar is still a highly effective player. Kopitar could easily play next year and still be pretty good, and I wouldn't have any hesitation in assuming that. But now that you have to move on, that this starts to become that next wave of guys' team, that's an opportunity if you're the Kings. How do we put Byfield, Fiala, and Kempe and Brand Clark? You know, I liked what they got out of Brand Clark this year, but they need more than that. This is a team that has had decent attempts against the Oilers. They went to 6 games once. They went to 7 games once. The Kings have had enough talent where if they got any other team in the first round other than the Oilers, maybe they go through. Maybe they're the team that's giving the Ducks a bit of a harder series right now than Edmonton. And look, we'll talk about Edmonton in a few minutes, but if I'm the Kings now, you have a lot of options on the table. How do we get to the next version of a winning team is the ultimate sliding doors question. Did the Kings ever really move on from that Dean Lombardi, Daryl Sutter mentality of forecheck, possession, defense, goaltending? The argument is, there's an argument to be made no, that they've prioritized the wrong things based on where the game is going. And look, really good regular season team, consistently in the playoffs. That's the first threshold. That's the first barrier to eventually becoming a contender. I'm not saying the Kings need to start from scratch, but they are going to need to get inventive here if they are going to take the leap in this next window post-Anze Kopitar. And that is not something to be taken lightly. You think about what the Capitals are going to be like post-Ovechkin, what the Penguins are going to be like post-Crosby, Malkin, Letang. Not just on ice, but culturally, that is going to be a massive swing. I said it before, it's good that Doughty is still there, but there is a conversation to be had about what the next version of the Kings looks like and how do they get there? How do they go from being a good team to being a contender? That's the question if I'm an LA fan. Now, speaking of the Oilers, who I've mentioned quite a few times, I said this on Locked On Oilers, and I said it at the top of the show when I was in that Senators segment talking about the goal that got overturned in Game 1. As an NHL team, and regardless of sport, you could say this about any team, anytime you leave the game in the hands of the officials, you do not get to complain. Anytime you make a mistake, and it comes down to an official making the right call, or in this case, a beneficial call, you are leaving meat on the bone. And look, I said it on Locked On Oilers. I had a small army of Ducks fans say I didn't say it or just not watch the show, but it is a good goal. The puck crosses the line. Do I have problems with how the officials got there? Absolutely. There is no official behind the net when the puck crosses the line. Number one. Number two, there's no whistle. There's a good 3 seconds where the puck is out of view, under Jari, and the whistle doesn't blow. Number three, it's called a goal on the ice, even though no referee definitively saw it cross the line. Number four, because it's called a goal on the ice, the review process needs to disprove it's a goal on the ice. They need the incontrovertible evidence. They don't get there. It's a good goal. The Ducks win. The Oilers did not play well enough in this game to deserve to win the game. Period. They did not play well enough to deserve to win. They got out to a 2-0 lead. They blew it. They got out to multiple leads in game number 3 that they ultimately lost 7-5. These are difficult times. The Oilers do not have their usual get-out-of-jail-free cards the way they've had in years past. Number one, the Ducks are one of the handful of teams in the NHL that have a number one defenseman in Jackson Lacombe, who is a strong enough skater that McDavid cannot just abuse him. Because in the first round against the Kings, McDavid has had more than enough opportunities to go around Drew Doughty, to go around whatever defender the Kings are trying to throw at him to stop him. He's had pretty good success against guys like Noah Hannafin, who are decent skaters. He's had success against Miro Heiskanen. He's had success against Quinn Hughes. But the teams that have flummoxed McDavid the most are the ones that force him to slow down. The teams that play McDavid the best defensively are the ones that force him to forecheck and cycle. McDavid doesn't want to do that. McDavid is the best player in the world because he is a walking zone entry. He can do anything he wants offensively 95% of the time. But because Lacombe is such a strong skater that he can force McDavid into less than ideal situations a little bit faster than McDavid is used to, you see it in McDavid's decision-making that he's a beat-off. And it still looks impressive. He had 2 breakaway chances where he went around Lacombe and very easily could have scored had Dostal not made a good save. But because Lacombe is so effective and the underlying numbers head-to-head, they're not great. When McDavid has been out there against Jackson Lacombe and Jacob Trouba, they've been outscored 2-1, the Oilers. They have a 46 expected goal share. In the series overall at even strength, McDavid's been outscored 5-2. That's just not good enough. This is the best player in the world. He needs to be able to dictate these games, and he has not shown a willingness to put on that hard hat, to get on the cycle, to forecheck, and to go to work. And that's not an indictment of his character. And that's one of the things that frustrates me a lot when we start sifting through debris and talking about losing and players not performing well. Connor McDavid's not a bad guy because he can't break through or change his habits against the Ducks. You're watching people in real time talk about McDavid like he's a bum because he's having a tough go of it in a series against a team that's exceeding expectations. Am I disappointed in McDavid's performance? Yeah, he needs to be better. That doesn't change anything about what I think of him as a player. Good players have bad series. That is part of how this works. You play as many playoff games, as many big games as Connor McDavid has. Occasionally, you're going to come up against a team that knows what it needs to do defensively. Unfortunately for the Oilers, the last 2 years, that happened to come in the Stanley Cup final. Right now, it's happening in round 1 against the Ducks. The Ducks, and I had said this on the crossover episode of Locked On Oilers I did with Kyle Carr of Locked On Ducks. Your goal, if you're a team playing McDavid, keep him in his own end. If we just make McDavid chase the puck around defensively, we're going to win a majority of our shifts, because if he's not on offense, we're winning those shifts. And even if we don't create scoring chances, even if we don't score, and the Ducks are scoring, for the record, like I said, they're outscoring McDavid 5-2 at even strength. They are killing them. And the thing that is really gouging the Oilers and really, really hampering their chances is the penalty kill. They have killed off 50% of the power plays the Ducks have gotten in this series. We've played 4 games. The Ducks have gotten 3 power plays per game. They have scored on 6 out of 12 power plays, the Ducks. That's not going to work. So, number 1, Adam Henrique, probably their most commonly used penalty killer, has been out since game number 1. Number 2, with that Adam Henrique injury, McDavid has been forced into a penalty kill role where him and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins have had a really rough go of it on the penalty kill. Number 3, McDavid is not a penalty killer by trade. When McDavid is out there shorthanded, he is looking to cheat, to go back the other way, to create shorthanded offense. That calculus in the regular season against most teams is a worthwhile trade-off. We saw McDavid killing penalties November, December, and then as McDavid started getting going on the run that would propel him to win the Art Ross Trophy again, the Oilers stopped using him in that capacity. He stopped killing penalties because it wasn't the best and most efficient use of his skill set. I'm not going to put the best offensive player in the world out there 4-on-5 against the team that is killing us on the power play, because he's going to be looking for offense. Right now, our goal on the penalty kill needs to be to stop sinking. Right now, the Oilers' penalty kill is a boat that is sinking in the middle of the ocean, and instead of dumping water off, they are trying to paddle their way to shore. This team is not going to make it killing penalties to this degree. They are down 3-1 in a series to a team they were expected to beat. The Ducks came into the playoffs ice cold. One of the worst records over the final 10 games of the regular season of any team that made the playoffs. The Ducks are young. A lot of their key players, Lacombe, Carlson, Gauthier, Seneca, are not playoff hardened. Their key players with playoff experience, Killorn, Chris Kreider, Jacob Trouba, John Carlson, supporting cast members. And the stars for Anaheim have been pretty damn good. Lacombe has been, I would dare say, a revelation in this series. He has been as good against Connor McDavid as I have seen any defenseman play in the last 10 years. And there are guys on occasion who have given McDavid a hard time with their skating and have forced him to make slower decisions. And that's the key. The thing with Anaheim, they force you to make a decision faster than you want to. On the forecheck, they are selling out for offense 100% of the time. They are constantly up ice. They are constantly daring you. Try and break out against our forecheck. Try and go the other way. We dare you. We're going to be so aggressive on puck that you're going to think you can break this puck out cleanly, and it's not getting there. You think you're going to get a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2 going back the other way because the forecheck has come in so aggressively. You're not. You're not breaking out against us. And even if you get it up the wall, it's not getting all the way out. It's going back in. And the Ducks have slowly but surely. When you think about hockey, especially in a playoff series where you're playing the same team over and over again in a short period of time, think about it like a tug of war, where the Ducks have slowly but surely been pulling the rope in their favor, and the Oilers are trying. It's not for a lack of effort, but the Oilers' desperation against this forecheck has been their undoing. The Oilers in chasing offense, and they have to. They've been trailing a lot in this series. They've been down multiple goals a lot in this series. So they have to chase. They have to adapt to the game state. But in adapting, in chasing the game, they are playing into what the Ducks want. The Ducks are forcing the Oilers to make mistakes. They are forcing them to make decisions faster than they want to. And then when McDavid's not going the way he's not in this series, it's not going to work. And look, Draisaitl's done everything he can. Draisaitl's line has been incredible in this series. Draisaitl, Podkolzin, and Kapanen, they've outscored the Ducks 5-0 at even strength in this series. The Oilers are getting enough from the supporting cast. And yes, Draisaitl on the second line, elevating what Podkolzin and Kapanen can do. That elevates the entire supporting cast. The bottom half of the lineup, Dickinson's been injured. Szymanski, 2 penalties in game 4. He might go out. We'll see what the status is on Henrique. Henrique probably not ready to go for round 1 if he can come back at all in the playoffs. They're down 3-1. The Oilers have shown incredible resiliency the last few years when they've been down in playoff series. We will see if they can drag this to a game 6. They have a little bit of time. They're going back home for game 5, which is good. But the Oilers have a lot of work to do, and it is going to be a real challenge to get the Oilers to commit to the type of hockey they're going to need to play if they want to make Anaheim uncomfortable. Draisaitl, Kapanen, and Podkolzin have shown you the way. Cycle, forecheck, board battles, hustle. Slow the game down, force the Ducks to play defense, and that's the key. Individually, beyond Lacombe, the Ducks' defense is not that impressive. Jacob Trouba is waiting to make a big mistake every time the puck is near him. He is constantly in conflict with his partner, chasing the puck, coming out of position to try and make a play. Attack him. You go to that second pair with Mitnyakov and Carlson, that is who Draisaitl and his line have done the majority of their damage against. You target the depth. You force those guys to make plays as individuals. That's how you win this series. The Ducks want this game to live in transition. They want to trade chances because they think they're faster than you and they think they can score more than you. If you're the Oilers, you need to adapt. You need to play dump and chase. You need to slow this game down, and you need to win your board battles. You need to hustle, and you need to forecheck. The Oilers are not getting nearly enough from anybody that's not Draisaitl in this series, and that's not good enough against the Ducks team they were expected to beat. I will not preemptively declare them dead. I will not start doing a post-mortem or an obituary until that series is over. But the second the Oilers are eliminated, the conversation will inevitably shift to what's McDavid going to do 2 summers from now? Knobloch out, Bowman out, Nurse out. The Oilers have a lot of question marks coming out of this season, regardless of how it ends, unless they go all the way and win the Stanley Cup or at least make the Cup final for a 3rd straight year. The Oilers have a lot of work to do if they are going to make it a series. Next up, Minnesota-Dallas has been incredible. It's been extremely opposite ends of the spectrum where you have the Stars dominating on special teams and you have the Wild dominating at even strength. At even strength, the Stars have been outscored 9-3. At even strength, the Wild have a 9-3 goals advantage on a 50% expected goal share. So yes, they are getting hot shooting. They are getting good goaltending, but that's part of the conversation right now. Through 4 games, we're at 2-2. We had a double overtime game sandwiched in there as well. The Stars have 3 even strength goals in 4 games, and this is a 2-2 series. Think about that in contrast to what we said with Ottawa, what we said with the Kings, with their lack of even strength offense. The difference, of course, the Stars have the high-end talent. They have Harley. They have Heiskanen, who's taking a maintenance day today, but is expected to play tomorrow on Tuesday. They have Jason Robertson, who has been arguably their best player in this series. Him and Matt Duchene on that second line with Bork have been as good a line as we have seen in the entire playoffs. The Stars' power play is running at 42% right now. The Stars' penalty kill is running at 84% right now. That's how you overcome shorthanded issues. And one of the real fascinating things, and I had said this in the series preview for Stars Wild about the Stars, you've watched the Stars really fine-tune their team based on the experiences of their playoff losses. They lost to the Oilers 2 years in a row in the conference final, largely on special teams, largely on individual star players making crazy plays. The Stars at even strength right now are getting flummoxed. They are getting body bagged. They are giving up 33 shots on goal per game. Jake Onger has a .902 save, which is better than he was in the regular season. He doesn't have a great goal saved above expected, but the Stars have gotten this far without Rope Hintz, who may or may not be able to go in Game 5. That's a storyline to follow. This Stars team is largely getting by on sublime individual play. When it comes to Robertson and Duchene, the entries they're able to create, the space they're able to manipulate, it creates a conversation if you're Minnesota. How do you offset what those guys can do at 5-on-5? How do you get them off their game to some degree? And how do you get the power play off their game? And that's really the key here. We watch special teams units go on crazy heaters all the time, where a power play will run at 35, 40% through the first couple rounds of the playoffs because it's such a small sample. We'll watch a penalty kill go 85, dare I say 90% for the first few rounds of the playoffs because they're running hot. And yeah, hot hand fallacy is real. There is no such thing as momentum in statistics. But when you watch sports, you understand what that feeling is. And I think the ultimate question, what breaks first? Does Dallas get going at even strength, or does Minnesota get going on the special teams? If Minnesota gets their special teams going, it might not matter if Dallas gets going at 5-on-5. If Minnesota has the edge at even strength and on special teams, Dallas does not have the answers. If Dallas gets going at even strength in conjunction with their special teams, then Minnesota might start to run out of answers. But there is star talent, star power everywhere in this series. This has been probably my second favorite series so far. We'll talk about Tampa Bay, Montreal in a second. That's been my favorite series, but there is talent everywhere. The hater in me wants the Wild to lose because I don't like Bill Guerin. I think he's a miserable person who largely gets by as an executive based on his playing career and who he's friends with. But that's a different conversation. I can check that at the door enough to say Minnesota has played well enough that they should probably be winning this series. The way the Stars won in overtime was a little sketchy. It was a long game, weird game, but that's how those types of games end. It's always a funky bounce. The Stars, they're dealing with injuries. We'll see if Matt Zuccarello can go. He was practicing on Monday. We'll see if Jakob Trenin can get going at some point back in the series. But the Stars have enough talent that they are making do at a disadvantage at even strength. The Wild have controlled a majority of this series when it comes to the flow of the game and the play, and they have the decisive edge in goals. But Dallas has this game at 2-2. You think about where the Stars have been, some of the playoff series, some of the opponents. I trust Dallas's core a little bit more than Minnesota's because let's be frank, this Minnesota group hasn't been out of the first round in 10 years. And there's nobody, I think, still on the team. Maybe Spurgeon was there 10 years ago. Maybe very young Jonas Brodin. But you think about how much battle the Stars have been through over the last 5 years and how they have continued to fine-tune the roster, fine-tune the coaching staff to try and get that last point, to try and get that last win. You know, you think about the Billy Beane scene in Moneyball where he's talking about, I just want to win the last game. Nobody remembers if you don't win the last game. No one cares you go on the crazy win streak. No one cares you make all these Western Conference finals. Until you're the team holding the cup at the end of the parade, at the end of the season in June, and you get to have the big parade, no one cares. This Stars team has been good as any team over the last 5 years to not win the Cup. I think they have a slight edge based on what we expect in playoff hockey. That's no disrespect to Matt Boldy, to Kaprizov, to Quinn Hughes, who have all been incredible in this series. Minnesota is going to need a little bit more from their stars on the power play, but I think you have a better chance of that than Dallas getting wholesale better 5-on-5 results to the degree. Look, 9-3 on even strength goals and then only on 50% of the expected goals. Something is going to break there. Either the Wild are going to start to get regression and they're not going to score as much, and Dallas is going to start to score, or you're going to have a tipping point where it stays like this for 7 games, and ultimately it comes down to special teams, which maybe not the best hockey, but certainly the most exciting. Okay, got to keep moving, trying to stay under an hour. Tampa Bay Montreal has been box office. 6-6 at even strength, both teams 6 goals apiece. Montreal, modest edge in expected goals at 53%. Tampa Bay obviously at 47%. Montreal, 26% on the power play. They're getting almost 5 power play attempts per game. That's an edge. Tampa Bay's 4 for 20. They're 20% so far. They're getting 5 power play attempts a game. Physical series, lots of penalties, nasty, has a bite to it. The Stars from Montreal are getting their doors blown off at even strength. Caufield's 5-0 against. Suzuki 4-0 against. Slafkovsky 4-0 against. At even strength, Montreal's best players are getting their teeth kicked in, and they have largely gotten by at even strength from their depth guys, and the depth guys like Josh Anderson, love to see it. Absolutely love to see the depth guys stepping up at even strength. And then the special teams play of the Stars, Slafkovsky, Caufield, Suzuki, being enough to offset their even strength woes is great. Now, on the Tampa Bay side of things, Brandon Hagel's arguably been the best player in the entire playoffs. He has 6 goals in 4 games. He has 7 points. The Jake Gensel's has 7 points as well, 1 goal, 6 assists. They're doing it in dominating fashion too. Hagel, 67% of the scoring chances, 75% of the shot attempts, 69% of the expected goals, 75% of the high danger chances in Brandon Hagel's minutes. The Lightning are absolutely dominating when he is on the ice at even strength. Jake Guentzel, not as dominant, but still really dominant. 66% of the scoring chances, 60% of the shot attempts, 67% of the goals, 63% of the expected goals, 50% of the high danger chances against. And I picked Tampa to win this series in 7 games. I trust Tampa Bay's Stars more because I've seen them do it before. But it would not shock me if Montreal's young guys just took over. You saw the Lane Hudson overtime game winner. You see what Caufield and Suzuki and Slafkovsky are capable of. You saw Slafkovsky record the hat trick in game 1, win the game in overtime. The Lightning have enough talent to make this a series. If I had to pick it right now at 2 apiece, I would lean Tampa Bay, but Montreal is absolutely capable. Shout out Jacob Dobesh as a young guy, first playoff series as a goalie, to answer the bell, to be in the situation you've been in. Absolutely impressive stuff, and I hope it continues to work out. I hope this series continues to be what it was supposed to be on paper, which it's been, where the Stars are making great plays at even strength and on special teams. You have really conflicting styles of play, where Montreal is up and down. It's track meet. There's quality chances at both ends. Tampa Bay wants to play this game in a locker. They want to pummel you. They want to forecheck. They want Cirelli and Hagel crashing the net. They want Guentzel picking corners. They want Kucherov orchestrating. Still no Victor Hedman. They've gotten by with JJ Moser and Ryan McDonough. We'll see if Hedman is able to come back at a certain point. But for me, if Montreal's can get, again, it's very similar to the conversation about Dallas and Minnesota. If Montreal Stars can get going at even strength, they probably win this series. If Tampa Bay can get their special teams going, they probably win this series. It's probably more likely Tampa Bay can get their special teams going than it is Montreal can get their even strength game going, just because special teams are so prone to variance because of the volatility of that game state. All right, the 5 most likely teams to win the Stanley Cup. Number 1, Colorado. Smoked the Kings. Didn't even give them a chance. They're going to get close to a full week off waiting to play the winner of Minnesota-Dallas. Minnesota and Dallas will have spent 2 weeks pummeling the crap out of each other. The Avalanche are more talented than either of those teams. I think the Avalanche's path is probably the easiest to the Stanley Cup final. I think they have the horses to get this done, and I think they could do it in a really short order if the bracket breaks right for them. I have No real concerns for the Avalanche so far after one series. Number 2, the Hurricanes. Largely same reasoning. They blew out Ottawa in 4 games, got the series done quick. They're going to get close to half a week off between them and the start of the next round. They will play the winner of Philadelphia-Pittsburgh. That is going to be a mentally draining series where even if Philly gets it done in 5 games, do you really trust the Flyers, who have gotten by a lot on individual talent against a structure as disciplined and rigid as Carolina's? It's not impossible, but I think Carolina's path to at least the Eastern Conference Final is really as easy as you're going to see from any team in the Stanley Cup playoffs, just because of the way the bracket shook out this year. Number 3, Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay has a modest edge against Montreal. I think Tampa Bay Buffalo would be an incredibly box office series. I would give Tampa Bay a slight edge against Buffalo. Depends if Victor Hedman comes back. I know Hedman hasn't been the same superstar that won a Conn Smythe 5-6 years ago, but he's a caliber of player that if he comes in at 70% could really change a series, especially from a leadership role. I think Tampa Bay has all the horses. I think they're one of the most talented teams in the league. I think they're probably the most talented team in the Eastern Conference when they're fully healthy. So we'll see on that. Number 4, Dallas. I think of any team other than Colorado's coming out of the West, I think it'll be Dallas. I think they have the individual stars to play with Colorado, who have the chance to maybe steal a game or two. They don't deserve to win. You get one of those double overtime wins and you suck a little bit of oxygen out of your opponent. Funny things can happen. And then number 5, I have Montreal. I would like to have Buffalo here. I don't really trust their goaltending. I don't really trust their lack of and I know it's crazy to say in justification of Montreal, who has all of one playoff experience run as a group itself, but I trust Montreal's group a little bit more overall. I think guys like Suzuki and Caufield, having been to a cup final a couple years ago as really young players, does a lot for their mentality. And I think if they can beat Tampa Bay, that would be proof they can beat anyone, because I do think Tampa Bay is a little bit better than Buffalo, even though Buffalo finished ahead of them in the standings. But those are our top 5. The honorable mention, I would probably go with Minnesota, just because if they beat Dallas, you could put Buffalo in there as well if you'd like. But I would go Colorado, Carolina, Tampa, Dallas, Montreal as my 5 most likely teams to win the Stanley Cup. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Theory of Hockey show. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Check out the community stuff down in the YouTube show notes, the Discord server, the Substack. We're working on the website, folks. Probably late this week, early next week, we'll have a couple games live on there where you'll be able to play trivia games against me, other users, and start to build out this community for what I think it can be. I will talk to you guys real soon. Until then, enjoy the Stanley Cup hockey. And if your team is still alive, dig in.